Back in the bar, Carlina said, "Dude, you are so worth having." Directly to Ted Summers, and then takes a swig of her beer from the beer bottle. Ted takes a swig of his beer from his beer bottle. Howard Colden doesn't do the same transaction, and says, "You two are weird." Ted slams the beer bottle next to him and says, "Kid, that's what you get for dealing with a stud." Colin's eyes roll to the side toward Carlina. Carlina puts her hand on the table, frowns at the situation in which Ted Summers had basically said. Ted points Colden toward the situation and asks him to get him another beer. "Can you give me another beer, Colden?" Colden puts his beer on the table on the bartender's stand and says, "Yeah, sure. I'll fetch you one, stud." He turns around and walks toward the station where the beers were and starts sorting through the empty beer bottles looking for one that was already open. Either open or able to open. He finds a beer that was open and pops and corks the lid off with a corkscrew, and then turns around and stares and gives the beer directly to Ted. Then Colin falls back a small portion of the bit and scoffs at the situation. Ted had immediately started drinking the beer. Carlina stares at Ted and is wondering if he was okay, but didn't say a word revolving the situation at hand. Colden turns around and walks into the bathroom and closes the door behind him. Takes a pee in the toilet, then flushes it. As a result of taking it out and peeing in the toilet and then turning around and putting it back in. However, it's not shown it's only showing of him peeing in the toilet. He exits the bathroom door and stares directly at the scenery, which seemed familiar, but he denies it. Assuming they are in safety, he says to himself, "Dude, we're in a safe area from him, so why the hell would he be here?" He walks towards Carlina, in which Carlina takes a peek behind Ted Summers. Ted looks at Carlina and takes another swig of his beer. Colin stands beside Carlina, takes his beer moderately and takes a swig from it, and spits a portion of the beer onto the floor, and turns around and stares at the unknown assailant in the costume and says, "Okay, anybody want to try out for the thrills and chills for the puppy dogs?" The costume man stared at Ted's back of his head and nodded yes. Colin took another swig of his beer. Ted does too, however, Ted, who seems to be frontal with the situation at first, body jolted. His body splinters and then twitches, and then pulls the beer bottle from his mouth, and blood starts to pour out of his mouth. Then all of a sudden, a pole enters directly through his stomach, impaling his stomach from behind. Colin looks from Carlina, in which Carlina's eyes was wide in horror, and looks directly towards Ted, and maliciously screams at the situation, dropping his beer bottle on the floor. Ted all of a sudden falls directly onto Carlina's body, and that's the moment when Colin realizes the situation at hand. He had realized that he was so drunk, he didn't realize that Ghostface had just killed Ted Summers. Colin and Mitch fell back from the situation on his back, using his feet and arms to fall back on the floor. Carlina Carlina, who was stuck between Ted Summers' dead body and Carlina, struggled for help as as she tried to get up from Ted's bigger body. Colden, which was seemingly effortlessly in shock, couldn't bear to understand the situation at hand. And before Colden could understand the situation and get up to help Carlina, it was too late. Ghostface pulls the pole back and slams the pole directly through Ted Summer's body into Carlina Warren's body, killing her instantly. Colden then fell back and stood up and walked backward. And that's when Ghostface walked closer and closer to Colden and used his knife to swipe Colden Mitche directly through the glass door behind him, knocking him out instantly.